This is Barry Zalma speaking for Claim School Incorporated's blog, Zalma on Insurance. Today we're speaking about dental and the chutzpah expressed by a convicted dentist who was sentenced to 20 years in prison for Medicaid fraud and yet demanded return of his license to practice dentistry. Licenses revoked for Medicaid and Medicare fraud are seldom important enough to go to a Supreme Court, but this one went to the Alaska Supreme Court, where the Board of Dental Examiners revoked Seth Lockhart's dental license after he was convicted of dozens of crimes perpetrated in furtherance of a fraudulent scheme of staggering proportions that jeopardized the health and safety of his patients. Lockhart appealed the board's revocation of his license, arguing that his punishment was inconsistent with past board decisions. On appeal, the Superior Court concluded that the board properly exercised its discretion by revoking Lockhart's dental license. In a case of chutzpah, or unmitigated gall, in Seth Lockhart versus the state of Alaska, a May 24, 2024 decision of the Supreme Court of Alaska, he asked for his license to practice dentistry, I guess from jail. The time of the Supreme Court was wasted as it resolved the issues raised by Lockhart. Seth Lockhart was issued an Alaska dental license in June of 2014 and a parenteral sedation permit on May of 2015. Between May 2016 and March of 2017, Lockhart systematically and unnecessarily sedated his patients in a manner that allowed him to fraudulently bill the maximum amount covered by Alaska's Medicaid program, overcharging Medicaid by more than $1.6 million. Lockhart routinely billed Medicare for sedation that was not performed, billed Medicaid at higher rates than other insurers, and created false dates of service to maximize his wrongful reimbursements. During the same period, Lockhart also stole an additional $412,500 from his business partner. In order to maximize his billings to Medicaid, Lockhart engaged in a series of standard of care violations. He sedated patients beyond the scope of his training and permit, sedated multiple patients simultaneously, billed Medicaid for sedation during routine cleanings, and sedated patients with underlying chronic illnesses and diseases that made sedation dangerous. He allowed his unlicensed office manager to sedate patients, pressured patients into unwanted sedation, and left sedation patients to drive themselves home. On 2 occasions, Lockhart's patients nearly lost their lives as a direct consequence of his reckless sedation practices. Lockhart also extracted one deeply sedated patient's tooth while riding a hoverboard and then sent a video of the unsafe extraction to his friends and family members without the patient's consent. After a 6-week bench trial ending in January of 2020, he was convicted on 46 charges, including 11 felony counts of medical assistance fraud, 3 felony counts of scheming to defraud, 1 count of felony theft, and other misdemeanor accounts. The trial court also issued an order finding that the state had proven 13 sentencing aggravators beyond a reasonable doubt. The trial court found that the evidence against Lookhart was overwhelming. He was ultimately sentenced to 20 years in prison with 8 years suspended. Following Lookhart's conviction, the Division of Corporations, Business and Professional Licensing filed a 17-count accusation seeking to revoke Lookhart's dental license. Lookhart stipulated to the facts contained in the accusation, leaving it to an administrative law judge to determine whether there should be a revocation. The ALJ concluded that Lookhart's astonishing range of misconduct was more wide-ranging and severe than in any prior case in which the board imposed a lesser sanction. Taken as a whole, the ALJ concluded that revocation was the clear and obvious sanction, adopting the division's contention that if the case does not require it, no future case will. The trial court noted that no Alaska case is factually comparable to the sheer scale of malfeasance, that the board painstakingly detailed Lookhart's misconduct, and that it had carefully considered and rejected any comparison with prior board cases. As relevant to the case, the statute which provides for license revocation in cases of fraud and providing the same for standard of care violations would be rendered meaningless. Lookhart stole millions of dollars from the state program that provides medical care for the indigent while simultaneously defrauding a business partner of several $100,000 more and committing an egregious string of standard of care violations that not only jeopardized the safety, privacy, and autonomy of his patients, but also brought the dental profession into disrepute. Lookhart stole millions from Medicare. In furtherance of his massive fraud, he repeatedly subjected his patients to great risk of harm. There are no cases in the board's history comparable to Lookhart's. The Supreme Court concluded that the board did not abuse its discretion by revoking Lookhart's license. None of the board's prior licensing cases involved misconduct of the scope and severity in this case, so there was no applicable precedent to limit the board's exercise of its discretion. In my opinion, Dr. Lookhart's actions and appeal was clearly chutzpah. Chutzpah is a Yiddish word for unmitigated gall, usually explained as a person convicted of murdering his parents who asks for clemency because he's an orphan. Lookhart, a dentist about to serve 20 years at state prison, had the chutzpah to demand his license to practice dentistry be reinstated. The Supreme Court gave his claim a detailed opinion but short shrift, and by doing so protected his fellow prisoners from being treated by a vicious person who almost killed a patient while extracting a tooth, balancing on a hoverboard, and stealing from Medicaid as well as his partner. This video was adapted from my blog, Zalma on Insurance, which is available free to anyone who clicks on the URL zalma.com/blog. You can subscribe to the blog and you'll be given notice of every blog posting, usually 5, sometimes 6 a week. And you can also subscribe to these videos on YouTube or on rumble.com. And if you do, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button on YouTube and the thumbs up button on rumble.com, and please tell your friends and colleagues about the blog and the videos and let them also subscribe. And if you're interested in further detail about insurance, insurance claims, insurance law, and insurance fraud, please consider for a very small fee subscribing to my Substack publications. Thank you for your attention.